Hi, I'm Dr. Rod and welcome back to my bike surgery. My guest this week is Clive Firth from Birmingham, and the reason he's not here at the moment is because he's out road testing the Trike that we worked on in part one. So I'm looking forward to him coming back and telling me if we've managed to make any improvement. Clive has a Trike which has been built using a 1977 Honda Goldwing 1000 as a donor, but he has quite a lot of problems with it. What we've done so far is some basic tests on the ignition system to make sure that that was working properly, but I did also find that there was a problem with the carburation. I'm now slightly concerned that Clive may have a problem with one of the valves in the engine, so if there's no major improvement when he comes back, I'm going to be looking at doing a compression test and possibly moving on to check the valve clearances. Because Clive's Trike is based on a bike engine and not a car engine, it does require a little more delicate setting up than some. And we've used the carburettor balancers this morning to make sure that everything was working as well as it could be on the carburettors. But if there is another fault, that may possibly need some kind of mechanical surgery. Let's hope not. Hi Clive, how's she doing?
She seems to be running smoother.
Good.
The only thing I found was some traffic lights and I came to slow her down. She's eager to stall, but she didn't exactly stall, but she's struggling. And other than that, she does seem a lot smoother.
So we have made a difference
Yeah,
then?
I think you have, yeah.
But things aren't quite exactly as they should be just yet.
Still don't have that finish power, you know, that oomph. So I think it might be, you know, what you said before.
Yeah, there's a possibility there might be, might be one or two other things to look at. So it does sound like we've made an improvement. What I'd like to do now, if that's okay with you, we'll get her back in the workshop. Let's do a compression check and let's make sure the valve clearances are okay.
Yeah.
All right?
That'll be fine, thank you.
Right,
I'll get this helmet off first.
Okay, right. Right, what I'd like to do, Clive, is just pop these spark plugs out now you've been out on the Trike. Let's have a look and see if it's running any differently. You can tell quite a lot by spark plug colour. When we looked at this earlier on, of course, you were quite sooty, which meant that everything was running just a wee bit rich. Now, to be frank, I have a suspicion from the smoke I could see coming from the exhaust system as you set off, that it may still be running a little bit rich. And actually that one, that now looks okay. Let's just have a look at this other. But it's possible that we may need to spend some time setting up the carburettors. And to get them right, they might need fully stripping down, I'm afraid. But that's a bridge we'll cross later on. Yeah, and if you look at that one, that's quite sooty. Do you want to pop the spark plugs out of the other side?
Yeah.
You'll need the spanner, and there's a screwdriver there just to get hold of the spanner if you need it. Of course, one of the problems with carburettors like this is the carburettor unit is quite a big and chunky arrangement. So if we start dismantling all that, there's a chance that you may not be able to ride the Trike home tonight, and we don't want to do that. But at some point, I do think it might be worth getting these carburettors fully serviced.
That's the one, very petrol-y.
Yeah, that's rich. That's definitely running a little bit too rich. One of the problems that you may have here, actually, Clive, the bike is running non-standard exhaust pipes. Because obviously it's a custom vehicle, and that's frequently what happens. You'll find, they're both quite dark. They're too dark. You will find that if you fit custom pipes that allow more gas to flow through the engine, the side effect of it can be to make the plugs burn rich. So it's possible that the carburettors may not in fact be faulty, but you may need to change the jet sizes. Now, doing that is a time-consuming job. It's not a difficult one. But it does mean you have to take some time doing it, and there's a lot of trial and error involved.
So they're not fixed jets in there then?
They're not fixed jets. You can screw the jets out of the bottom of the carburettors and fit new ones. But finding the right size is a bit trial and error, and it can take some time.
Okay.
The other thing that I was concerned about, though, is the mechanical condition of the engine. And just to make sure that everything's sound inside there, what I want to do now is a compression check. Now, the engine needs to have good compression inside the cylinders in order for it to run properly. There's a very rapid and easy way of telling whether it can do that or not. This is a compression tester. And all I'm going to do now is offer that down into the spark plug holes, and we'll do these one at a time. Let's try that cylinder because we think that one's more healthy. What I'm going to ask you to do now, if you turn the ignition on, hold the throttle wide open and just give it a very quick spin on the throttle, and we should see that needle come up. It won't start, but just a very quick spin on the throttle.
Throttle wide open.
Okay, throttle wide open, and again. Right, I'm not getting a reading on that at all. Maybe my gauge doesn't fit your engine properly. Right, have another go. That's better. Right, can you see the reading on there?
Yeah.
Right, and that tells us how much compression there is in the engine. Now that was up to just below 120. I'm reading off the black scale, which is the old imperial scale, and that's pounds per square inch. Now that's pretty good. what you're looking for is around the same compression reading from each cylinder. So what was that compression test all about? Well, any engine needs compression inside it in order to ignite the fuel properly and make it burn. The good news on Clive's Trike is that all cylinders were giving compression readings above 120 psi, which is excellent and far better than I'd expected. Now we checked the compression and that's actually fine, but I'm still slightly concerned about the valve clearances, so what we'll do next is check the clearances. Now what we've managed to do, Clive, is get the engine positioned in the right place, but it's been quite tricky, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Because the Trike's got an axle on it and a differential, the ideal way to do this is to put it in gear and roll the thing backwards and forwards, but we've eventually managed to find the timing mark for the front cylinder. What I'm going to do now is remove this cover from here. This cover covers up your valve gear and you've got one at each side, of course. And these 4 bolts hold it in place. Now what you will find is that Honda use bolts like this to hold cam covers on. Most of the other manufacturers don't. And you do need to be a little bit careful with these bolts as well, because I'm afraid I have found with past experience, if you're not too careful when you put them back together, they can actually shear off. So we'll be treating these quite delicately. There we go, there's a cover coming loose. The other thing that's worth looking at at this stage as well is each one of these bolts has a conical rubber seal on it, and they can perish and get damaged. And actually, looking at some of those, some of these aren't in fantastic condition. So at some point it might be worth replacing those.
And they have to be genuine, not just a case of O-rings or...
They've got to be the genuine Honda seals. But if you go to a good Honda dealer, they should be able to sell them to you. And they won't cost a huge amount of money. The cover itself also has a rubber seal on. Oops, and those are the bolts coming loose. That rubber seal there, you can use over and over again. If at some point you find it does begin to leak, again, it's not too expensive to replace it with a new one, but you don't need a new one every time, as you do with some engines. Right, let's just put that aside and let's see what we're looking at here. This is the valve gear for these 2 cylinders. And you've got an inlet valve, which is there, and an exhaust valve, which is there. And each one of these has an adjuster on it, which is that screw and lock nut there. Now what we need to do, now we've got the engine set up in the right position for this cylinder, we can check to make sure that the gaps are right in there.
Have they got to be equal top and bottom?
Actually, on this particular engine they do. But if you're working on anything else, always check your workshop manual, because the settings do vary from bike to bike. Right, we've checked that cylinder, that's fine. That's the one I was bothered about. That's okay. What we will do now is we'll turn it over, we'll do the same thing on that side, and then we'll do the same thing on the other 2. And then I think it's time for a cup of coffee. Don't you?
That sounds good to me.
Okay, let's do that then. Right. And if you're wondering what wood carving like this has to do with motorcycle maintenance, well, this is Clive's big secret, because you actually make these, don't you, Clive?
That's right, yeah. I have a much neglected wood carving shop now, because I actually, since buying that, I'm just on that all the time. I trike, do a bit of carving, trike some more, trike some more, maybe do a bit of cleaning up in the workshop, and then trike some more.
I guess it's pretty time consuming making something like this. How long does it take to produce a carving like that?
Something like that. I think it was something like 5, maybe 6 days, but it wasn't continuous carving, it was just like 4 hours a day.
It must be pretty intensive stuff though. You must get really focused on what you're doing to produce something like that.
It's a way of escapism. It's a way of escapism. It's English lime wood. Pear cut out for glasses. Pear wood turned on a small miniature lathe that I improvised using a drill and a nail and a piece of wood, which is another story.
So you made a lathe from a nail?
A nail, yeah. Nail became the tailstock and the drill became the headstock.
Anyway, shall we go and have a look at this Trike? What I'd like to do next, actually, Clive, we've more or less checked most of the things that needed checking, and I'm actually now quite confident that there's no major mechanical problem with your Trike. I'm sure you'd be relieved to hear. I do think there's a carburation problem, but the last thing that I would like to check out while you're here today, let's have a look at the ignition system and let's make sure that that's doing exactly what it should do.
That'd be brilliant.
So, okay. Right, Clive, the last job I want to have a look at on your Trike is, of course, the ignition timing. Now, we've already checked everything else out, so we may as well check it. I don't think there's a problem with it, but let's just make sure. Now, on this old Goldwing, of course, you used to have points ignition, which is contact breakers. More modern bikes would have electronic ignition. But on this one, unless somebody's converted it, I'm expecting to see 2 sets of points underneath this cover here. Have you had a look in here before at all?
I've seen them, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's 2 sets.
So there are 2 sets of points in there?
I've been told it's a good idea to swap them over onto an electric ignition, but I haven't got the ability or the knowledge to do it yet, so I'll wait and see.
An electronic ignition kit is actually quite a good idea. In many respects, it's more reliable than this old-fashioned contact breaker setup, in that once you've put electronic ignition on and set it up, you can more or less leave it forever. This system here, however, will require occasional maintenance. So what I want to do today is just check that the points gaps are correct and make sure the points are opening and closing as they should. Now again, the easiest way to do this on a bike is to have it on the centre stand and turn the engine over to the right place. We can't quite do that with the Trike with its rear axle. So what I'm going to do is turn the ignition on and just touch the starter a couple of times. And what I should be able to do, hopefully, thank you, is just pull the clutch lever in, just a touch. And right, if you leave it there, I think we've got a gap now at that side. So that actually looks spot on. Can you see that? Just turn the ignition off again while I check it. Yeah. So we don't short the points out. But there, can you see that feeler gauge going into there? Yeah. Well, what an interesting day we've had today. It's rather unfortunate I couldn't solve all the problems with Clive's Trike, but at least we do now at least know what the problem is. Come back and join me next week when we'll have another biker with another project.